Hello, everyone. Welcome to this 49th edition of Festival du Nouveau Cinéma. Today, we are here for the online Q&A session for the film Sin La Habana, part of our national competition. We are very happy to have the director of the film, Kaveh Nabatian, with us today. Well, I have to add, Kaveh is not only the director, but also the screenwriter and the composer, and I think you shoot part of the images and you did a lot of things in the movie. Welcome. Thank you very much for being here with us, Kaveh.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, like I said, Kaveh is a multidisciplinary artist. Can you say that? You have you do photography, you shoot films, you do clips, you play music, you tour, you have a band, you do a lot of different things, and also you've been presenting films with us for like many of your films. Some of your films have been presented in the FNC before. The last one I remember was the Nan La Cour Carnaval that also won the short film award for the most creative short film, and you had been commissioned by the festival to do other like carte blanche for us, and so I've seen you many times in the festival during the past years, and we're very happy to have you back this year as part of our feature film national competition here. Would you want to talk about a bit, I think it is your first fiction feature, am I right?
Yeah, well, first, let me just say, I just want to thank the FNC for all of its support over the years. It's not, it feels like kind of like a family thing, and that's really nice, because this can be a really lonely job, and so it's nice when you feel like, a side of the industry has your back, and that's really special for me. What was the question, though?
I was wondering if it was your first feature film.
Oh yeah. First fiction feature film. Worked on it for. I was going through old emails yesterday when I was thinking about this Q&A and this movie, and the first emails talking about it are from 2005. So 15 years it's been brewing, wow. Which is way too long.
Okay, yeah, well, because I was wondering, did you what I saw from you, a lot of it had this kind of experimental flair in it. There was this beautiful images, like nice in terms of textures, and like there's music and stuff. This has a quite straightforward story, although I have to add the form part of it is very interesting to talk about, and I'd like to come back to the form later. But in terms of the story, is a kind of a different type of work that I see this time from you. Would you want to talk a bit about the background, like you said, since 2005, which is like 15 years, and how you developed the work? What was the background? What was the main idea behind it, and how did you approach it? Like how you come up with this project actually?
Well, so in 2005, I was in Havana working on another film. I was writing a script there, and a friend of a friend was this musician in Havana, Pablo Herrera, who is at the time probably the greatest hip hop producer of Cuban history. And because we were like sort of had mutual friends, he asked if I wanted to come over and play trumpet on one of his beats. And I was like, I think Cuban trumpet players are going to be way better than me. You don't need me to do this. But he's like, no, come. And so we jammed, and then we just started talking about cinema, and he had this real interest in making a film that spoke about the Afro-Cuban experience, because a lot of films, even within Cuba, are not really talking about the Afro-Cuban experience. And for me, after having spent like a few weeks there at that time, you go to Cuba for the first time and you have all these ideas, it's like, this 99% literacy rate and Afro-Cuban all-stars, and it's got this like idea of sensuality and salsa, like you have this like tropical paradise idea in your head. And then you get there and all of those things are real, but there's also a lot of other things that are real that are a lot darker. And I think that I was seeing there's a lot of sex tourism there, but the way sex tourism works in Cuba is kind of different than the way it works in like places like Thailand or in West Africa where I've seen it. And often, or at least I guess as much as men going down there to get laid, it's also women going down to like have some experience with some hunky, passionate Cuban guy is going to sweep her off her feet. And so you end up seeing a lot of couples that actually like you know, after a few nights, they turn into these sort of couples, but often the Cuban person will have a relationship with another Cuban partner. And so you're walking in the streets and you often see these like 45-year-old white women with hot, you know, Cuban men who are like 22, and you're like, what's going on here? And you see it so much, and then, you know, they're called jineteros, people who are basically making money off of, it's like being a gigolo. It's somewhere between prostitution and a normal relationship, I guess. And it's very easy to judge jineterismo, you know, as an outsider, or even for a lot of Cubans are very judgmental about it. But it started to just occur to me like, well, it's really easy for me to look at this like white lady and this Cuban dude and think I know everything about what's going on. But what are the real stories here? So I started actually talking to people who were in relationships with jineteros or jineteras, and talking to jineteros, and realizing there's a huge variety. Like there's a huge spectrum of what jineterismo is. You know, like there's couples where people really fall in love, but one person happens to have more power and can give some opportunity to someone else, but it is really because they just want to be together. And then you go all the way to people just like trying to screw over whoever they can to get whatever it is they're looking for, to get out or to get money for their family. And then even then, like I started to realize that it's really easy for me as someone who comes from the kind of privilege of a Canadian who has enough money to travel to Cuba to judge the person who's just trying to get money for his family, or to, you know, or just to have shoes or whatever. But I don't have to, if I want to buy shoes, sometimes I don't have enough money to buy shoes, but usually I can if I save up a little bit. Whereas those opportunities aren't available for people necessarily. So all of that, like all this idea of how romance like can become transactional was really interesting to me. And then for Pablo, like I was saying, it was a lot about showing an Afro-Cuban side of things that was, you know, got into Santeria and got into like what the reality of an Afro-Cuban existence is. And so those two stories over the course of many years came together in many iterations of the script, and then we got to this.
Okay, well, it's interesting you talk about mainly about that, this side of the story, and then I kind of saw like during a few like moments in the film that we see like it's as if like the camera just strays away from like what's happening like in the scenario, but then it goes back into the streets, like the central streets, like where we see like kids playing, and then there's a lot of poverty, and there's a lot of like there are a lot of undertones like what happens all around the main story, which makes it very rich, because like we see a lot of what you say, not directly, but like part of the story. There's also this very I think important theme that comes up, like these people that want to like some of those that you said, they want to feed their family, buy shoes, and then some of them, they have other aspirations. They want to come out, they go out, do something else. Like it's the story of the protagonists here in this film. And it's also the story of like immigration and a kind of forced, inevitable exile for these people, because at a certain point they have to move out to do something else. And it's interesting when they come to Montreal, and he comes to Montreal, then it goes to another story, which is another immigrant family with its own cultural background and its own restrictions, living in another country, and they all come together and make this complex relationship. I also like to hear you about the exile theme and this heritage of the cultural heritage of like different families in different places that come together, actually, that plays really hard in the film.
Yeah, well, I mean, as the product of a relationship between a Yankee American woman and an Iranian Jew, I grew up around a pretty intense culture clash. And I feel like often stories about immigration deal with like the immigrant who comes and has to force their way into like the local person's world and what that relationship is like. But I mean, just as often, you do see two immigrants from vastly different cultures in places like Montreal, where Montreal becomes kind of this Venn diagram for the two cultures. But nobody is a real Montrealer. Nobody is comfortable with the language. Nobody really understands the culture. And so, like, I really like it when there's couples, I mean, I find it really interesting in any case when there's couples where neither one speaks English as their native tongue, but together they speak English. And so they have to develop their own way of communicating. They kind of invent their own English. And so this couple is one of those where it could have been Montreal, it could have been, you know, Stockholm or whatever. It almost didn't really matter. It was more about how these two people came together and shared this, like, this experience of being exiled and immigrants together. And, you know, obviously the story of an Iranian female immigrant is, to me, super interesting. And she's obviously gone through her own crazy story, and her problems are not the same as Leonardo's problems in the film. So it's like, where's the Venn diagram between them? Because the kind of struggles they're having are totally different. Like, her struggle is with her culture, and her struggles with her father, and her struggles with what it means to be an Iranian woman in North America. He doesn't care about that. Him and his mom are fine. His struggle is, how can I be a dancer and, like, attain my dreams outside of Cuba or within Cuba? Like, how can I be the person who I have dreamt of being, and who I have the skills to be, and who I have, you know, these aptitudes. Like, you know, you see these incredible artists in Cuba and here, you know, like the guy who played the percussion in the film is one of the great percussionists of Cuba. And he got out, like, I think 5 years ago or something. And I think, if I remember correctly, he's mostly working as a janitor. And then every once in a while he gets a music gig. And when he came into the studio and played over all this music, I was just like, this guy is better than any percussionist in Montreal, like, by far as I could tell. And he's a janitor, you know, like, that's the reality. And you always see, you know, the taxi drivers who are actually chemistry professors back in Syria or in Iran or whatever. So yeah, just how do two immigrants from different worlds come together, and what do they share, and what do they have as differences? It's really interesting to me.
Yeah, it becomes another hybrid, maybe not very real from external side world. They kind of their world, but not their real world from outside. It's a kind of hybrid situation, and then they still have to fight when they come here. Like the girl goes through, like, fighting with her, like, very traditional family. It's just very traditional, and then kind of like violent comments and things like that. Yeah. And how did the preparation go? Because you're shooting between two countries, and I think it's very hard to, like, manage to, like, in terms of, like, scouting, shooting, in terms of preparation, in terms of, like, crews, stuff like that. How did that go?
Well, I mean, it was complicated because with Cuba in particular, you've got a lot of visa issues. You know, it's, like, hard to get permits to film there, first of all, because you have to go through the government, because everything, you know, it's a communist country. And so the government has a lot of rules. And for, like, at one point, after our permit was granted, it was then revoked, and they wouldn't tell us why. And suddenly we couldn't shoot the movie. It was like, okay, do we try to shoot in the Dominican Republic and get some, but I really didn't want to do that. And it was, you know, a nightmare. We couldn't figure out what was going on. And then finally our fixer down there, or the, you know, location services guy, managed to talk directly with the Minister of Culture to find out what the problem was, and then we were able to fix it. But if we hadn't had someone with so much tenacity down there, we just wouldn't have been able to shoot the movie. And then on the other hand, we had Cubans who wanted to come into Canada, and Canadians are very wary of Cuban tourists or immigrants or people who want to come to work here because, or just even visit, because often people will try to stay. And so the visa for Evelyn, who plays Sarah in the film, was originally not granted. And so again, it's like, okay, well, the whole movie falls apart without Sarah. So what do we do? And it was like this big panic. And then we got a lawyer. We had to get all these, like, letters of attestation proving that she wasn't going to stay, and blah, blah, blah. And then, of course, as you probably know, she lives here now. So after, she never went home. Kind of amazing. So it's kind of one of these stories of art or life imitating art, I guess, in this case. So there was a lot of complicated stuff there, and that wasn't fun. But in terms of, like, location scouting and all that stuff, it was super fun. And I think partly because I've always felt like a little bit of an outsider in Montreal. Like, I've never, just because I have come from a hybrid family, I've never really felt a sense of home anywhere. It was important to me to look at Montreal with the eyes of someone who was not a Montrealer, and the same with Cuba. And it was also important to not exotify Cuba, which is why we worked with an amazing cinematographer, Juan Pablo Ramirez, who's a rising star of Mexican cinematography, because I felt like he would be able to show Cuba in a way that wasn't Cuban, but also wasn't like a North American exotification of Cuba. And he'd also be able to see Montreal from a more kind of objective or like an immigrant's perspective. He had never been to Montreal. So we spent some time, I think we spent like a week in Cuba scouting, and then I went back and did some more scouting. And then we, you know, he came up here and we scouted here. And it was just really fun. And it was interesting to kind of develop the look that we wanted to create, how we wanted it to feel different in Montreal versus Havana, and to see how Juan Pablo was able to, or how he was experiencing the cold himself. He'd never seen snow before, and the actors had never seen snow when they came here. So it was a lot of like, there's a lot of experiencing what the reality of these immigrants would be for the people involved in the film. And that was really important to me, to make it as much an experiential shoot for the people involved with the film as for the characters of the film. I was trying to, you know, also cast as close to the, you know, like as close to the characters as possible. So for example, Yona, who plays the character of Leonardo, he is a incredible ballet dancer. He's one of the best in the world. And he, you know, he's a guy who left Cuba to pursue a dance career. He lives in Germany. And, you know, Aki, who plays Nassim, has some similarities with Nassim, and then same with Evelyn. You know, she's an incredibly ambitious woman who really wanted to get out of Cuba. Now she did. So there's a lot of parallels there, and I think that was really fun, because it meant that the acting, they weren't like acting super like roles that were out of their minds. It was like really coming from within as much as possible. And a lot of the work in rehearsal and with the actors was about having them find what was real about the characters for them, rather than trying to act an idea of what the characters should be.
Okay. Well, like I pick on what you said, that you like that you are an outsider, and then you try to not judge and see what's happening there, and like the way you are in Montreal, and I noticed that you travel a lot, you perform in different countries, you have shot different films in a lot of different countries. Is it that the journey, the traveling itself becomes part of the work, part of the project itself, and how to develop it, how to work with it, and then how to present it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that because I don't have this like feeling of home anywhere, I feel almost more at home by being in movement than staying in one place for a super long time. And I think also, you know, like I spend less time in Montreal now than I used to, and it's made me understand Montreal so much better and actually enjoy it and appreciate Montreal a lot more than when I was starting to feel a little bit stuck here. But yeah, I mean, I really feel like people are all the same everywhere, but that cultural factors are so powerful, and it really makes you understand something about humanity if you're able to see violently different cultures and how they cope with the experience of being alive on this planet in the place where they were born. You know, like, you know, I was thinking about Mozart yesterday, and just like how, like, if Mozart hadn't been born white in Germany or Austria or whatever, I guess Germany, what would he have played? And like, probably there is somebody that talented being born every year in a different country, you know, and how much music, like, we're just kind of lucky that Mozart was alive at a time when he could write music down, and then so that we could record it later, like for future generations. But how much music is just like being lost all the time? I'm so curious about, like, who was the Brazilian guy in the 1780s who was making music, and what did that music sound like? We'll never know, you know? And so I'm just really interested in, like, how does this experience of being alive, how does it change from culture to culture and from life to life?
Mm-hmm. Interesting. And there's another thing that also comes with the traveling itself. Like, I mean, not the traveling, but the places that you visit. This sense of magical relationship, the spiritual ideas and rituals that there are present in a number of your films. Sorry, we had them in Non La Cour Carnaval, and we had this in. I saw you had another project in rituals of catharsis that you're recording all over the planet, like, I don't know, different countries. And there is a very important part that plays in Sinda Havana as well, because this kind of protection, this magic comes in, and this ritual, and like what are your thoughts? What does that play in your work in general, and specifically in this one?
Well, I think that the reality that we engage with on a daily basis is, you know, such a tiny, tiny little slice of what reality really is. And I think that there's no way that as a human you can even fathom what's really going on out there. And I think that something that's been lost in North American culture is ritual. And I think what ritual does is that it provides a way to like peek under the blanket of reality that we've decided to look at. And so by taking a leap of faith, whether it's Santeria or voodoo in Haiti or Hinduism in India or whatever it is, by taking a leap of faith and really going for something, you get to experience like a sense of awe and magic that you don't get from not doing it. And so I really like participating in these rituals and trying to take those leaps of faith. You know, I was initiated into Santeria as part of this project. And while I don't necessarily like, you know, in Santeria, you've got a lot of, they're called orishas. They're basically these gods who represent different energies, you know, like fire and lightning and passion, or water and maternity, or femininity and honey and rivers, and all of that is very much in the film. Like all the each person kind of represents an orisha in the film. But so yeah, like so for me personally, I was initiated into this, and the ceremony to become initiated is very, very intense. You know, it involves animal sacrifices and crazy drumming, and you go into a trance. And even if I don't believe all the details, like if I don't necessarily like think that there's a guy named Elegua who's like walking around that I should be giving candy to, but like the experience of praying to Elegua or like giving candy to Elegua in your house and if you know, feeding it, that brings you into contact with something that you just wouldn't be in contact with if you weren't doing that. So it's not, to me, like all these rituals and religions, it's not so much about, for me personally, taking it literally. It's more like, if I go deep with this, am I uncovering something that I wouldn't uncover otherwise? And am I seeing a reality I wouldn't otherwise? And because like and even then you're still just peering under another blanket, and there's like 5 million more blankets, and nobody gets to look under all the blankets, I don't think. But getting out of, hold on, let's see. I think that at least getting out of the normal blanket of it's COVID and it's raining and I missed the metro, and you know, and getting into something where your spirit is fed is super important. And so yeah, that comes across in all my films, and I tried to make it like the Santeria and the spirits of those people in the film was almost like those characters were operating in parallel to the characters in the film. So you've got sounds of thunder and lightning when Leonardo's dealing with something difficult, because he represents Shango, who's the god of thunder and lightning and fire and dance. Or Sara, her orisha is Oshun, who's the goddess of femininity and honey and the color yellow. So like there's you know, she's always wearing yellow. And there's all these like ways of kind of putting the film together so that if you're aware of those relationships with Santeria, you can kind of see it as a classic Santeria story. Because one thing that's really interesting about Santeria is they have these things called patakis, which are these stories that everybody, like all babalaos, like spiritual people, will know these patakis. And they kind of, the way they're written down or the way they're spoken of speaks to like a Cuba that doesn't really exist anymore. You know, it's like a Cuba of the 1700s or 1800s. And so I was really interested in trying to make an updated pataki, like a modern day movie about what happens if you get Chango and Oya and Oshun in 21st century Havana and Montreal, and how does that work? So that was kind of like, so in a way we're dealing with like a fairy tale or a mythological quest, but in this very human 21st century way.
Nice. Well, this one, I really like to, that we talk a little bit about the images. They are sublime. They are beautiful. They've shot in a variety of techniques, formats. I think you shot part of it, the 16 millimeters part of it, and the whole mood of the movie that comes with the image. How was the approach to that? Because they are really beautiful images, actually. And you said you named your cinematographer earlier. You want to talk a bit about that, and then how was your ideas about the image to begin with, and then that you came to this level at the end?
Yeah. Well, it was really important for me to, I mean, as much as it is kind of a straight narrative in a way, I still wanted to play with form a little bit. And, you know, in my next movie, I think I want to play with it even more and make the edges even blurrier. But I didn't want so we shot a bunch of it on 16 millimeter with a Bolex, and I actually shot all the Bolex stuff. And the idea there wasn't like that it was a dream state exactly, but it was a state of kind of that spiritual state. And so what I was thinking is, okay, if the film itself is a character in the story, how does the film react to the characters thinking about their past, or to their characters thinking about their religious kind of connection to each other or to their Orisha? And it's like, so it's like the film is reacting to that spiritual force. And that's the 16 millimeter stuff. And then we decided to shoot the whole thing in like a widescreen format, but the idea in the first part in Cuba was we shot it with spherical lenses. So like Super Baltar has these beautiful lenses that were, you know, they shot The Godfather with them. And so we just kind of put black bars on top of, above and below them. And we shot it quite wide angle in general. And the idea there was that that's where Leonardo, that's where he's from. And so when he looks around Cuba, he knows what he's seeing, and he can see everything, you know? Like when he's walking around, he has a sense of the space. He knows like things are in focus, whether they're close or far. And then the idea was when he gets to Montreal, all of a sudden he doesn't have those like point de repère. Like he doesn't really have, even visually, he can't really see the way he saw in Cuba. So then we switched into anamorphic, because what happens with anamorphic is whatever's out of focus is really out of focus. And the whole feeling of anamorphic just changes. And it's pretty subtle, and probably no one actually notices this sort of stuff. But I think you feel it a little bit. Like when it comes to Montreal, there's like a feeling that's different, not just in the, you know, obviously the colors are different because it's muted colors because it's winter in Montreal, but there's also just a feeling of difference in terms of how the film is reacting, like how the lenses are reacting to the story. Mm-hmm. And so again, it was this idea of like, how does the film as a character react to the story? And then at the end, as you might remember, there's like a split diopter of everything, like so the images start to be doubled. And the idea there was like, that's the spirit of the marble, basically. It's like everything is being seen through the marble, and nothing is going the way anyone thought. And so if the marble is his destiny, it's like now we're inside the marble, and the marble is like changing. And so we're changing along with the marble. The film is changing along with the marble. And then at the end, he gets to a new place in his destiny, and then it opens up.
Okay, well, I think that brings us to the end of our session. I'm just wondering if you had something else that we haven't touched that you would like to share with us? Or...
I don't know, I feel like I talked a lot there.
Okay,
I'm good.
Okay, Kaveh, thanks a lot for sharing this beautiful film with us. We would really have loved to have it in cinema, but due to some unusual circumstances, we had to cancel that. But I deeply hope the film goes very far on the planet. Thanks for your generous participation also. And for our spectators, if you like this program, go explore other programs of the section National Competition and other sections, and follow FNC on Facebook and Instagram. And our 49th edition will be online until the end of October, on October 31st, all across Canada. Thank you very much. See you next time.